Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what it's doing.
That doesn't mean you can start skipping.
Does it mean what?
I went to the channel and I didn't see a lot of good, just a few recordings. That's why I wondered.
Well, you have to look under live because this is broadcasting live right now.
But I'm saying
And then it uploads as a video and it's stored under live because it was live.
Oh.
Yeah, YouTube makes a distinction between uploads and live videos. Even when they're recorded and left as videos, it still makes the distinction that it was originally recorded live. So, yeah. Okay, as we have done in the past two sessions, I would like to begin with a prayer from the Divine Liturgy that you do not normally hear because it is prayed quietly. So I will pray. This is a different one this time. So, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. I will enter your house. I will bow down before your holy temple in awe. Lead me, O Lord, in your justice. Because of my enemies, direct my way in your sight. No truth can be found in their mouths. Their hearts are vanity. Their throats are gaping graves. With their tongues they flatter. Condemn them, O God. Let them fall in their designs. Drive them out for their many offenses, for they have defied you. Let all those you protect be glad and rejoice forever, and you shall dwell in them. They who love your name shall rejoice in you, for you will bless the just, O Lord. You crown us with favor as with a shield. Amen. That's right, it's a psalm.
Sounds like
That was going to be my first question. Does anybody know what psalm that is?
First hour, it sounds so familiar.
Yes, it's Psalm 5, which
I was
is
gonna say, is it Psalm 5?
we do pray it at first hour. That's correct.
Doing this for a long
But
time.
it is prayed as a part of the prayers before the iconostas, which are prayed by the priests and deacons who will be celebrating the liturgy. The very first thing that we do is usually the church is quite empty except for one or two people, and it doesn't have to be. You're all welcome to come. But we stand and pray quietly. It's the prayers before the icon screen, and then we go into the altar, and then we vest, and there's vesting prayers, and then we do the prothesis, the rite of preparation. So the first thing is the prayers before the icon screen. And I thought that I'd like to point out a couple of things about this prayer, I guess. One thing is there's a rubric that precedes this prayer. It says this, it says, that is the priest and deacon, bow to the faithful on either side and go to the sanctuary, saying the prayer that we just prayed. So it's interesting that the rubric says that there are faithful there. You know.
I mean, the people who don't show up at the last minute.
Right. But many times there's no one at all. But it is the case. People don't know. You know, you look at the liturgy. What time is divine liturgy? And you look and you come for the divine liturgy. But actually, the time that you see, I just usually start just at 10. So the prothesis actually, or the prayers before the icon screen, begin at 9:30.
Okay.
Yeah. So people are welcome to come and pray quietly, you know, because sometimes people come too and they don't know that anything is going on, so they talk loudly, you know, but the liturgy's already begun. So if you do come, you know, you should be quiet and you should be prayerful during these rites. Okay, that begin the divine liturgy. Then I wanted to talk a little bit about a question that came up at the last class, which, because as I said before, we're using this text to begin to be a springboard to our discussion, but we are free to explore other things as well. And one of the things that came up was a question about the icon screen. Unfortunately, it was your husband who brought it up, and he's not
Right.
So you'll have to relay some of this information. Or he can watch the video. Yeah, that's right. That can be how you relay it. So I did a little digging into it just to give him more of an answer. It's still, I don't have a perfect answer to his question, but his question was about, we have a very programmatic way that the icon screen is arranged. And his question was that always the case, or did that develop? The icon screen definitely developed over time. And I knew this, but I found it out again. I dug it up again, and the icon screen was not original, to the Byzantine tradition. That didn't originally have an icon screen. Rather, it had a railing. It had an altar rail, which is interesting to note, because one of the distinctions that we often observe between the Latin Rite and the Byzantine Rite is, the Latin Rite has an altar rail, and the Byzantine Rite has an icon screen. But if you go back far enough, and I mean way back, so I'm talking, before iconoclasm, which was 9th century, and I'm not sure how far back before that we have to go, but it was just a railing. It's interesting, though, that there was a railing, there was a demarcation, a separation, right, a border between the altar and the nave, all the way back, right? And you see that prefigured in the temple, the temple of the Lord in Israel and in Jerusalem. That there was a curtain that separated the Holy of Holies, which was torn, right? But so that was marked out from the beginning. That was always the case. And it's interesting. Some of that was very practical. If you read some of the history of the way that people behave during the liturgy, I talked a minute ago about people coming in and talking loudly. There's nothing new about people coming in and talking loudly or being rowdy, people being rowdy in church. And this railing, one of the reasons it existed was crowd control. Okay, it was because we needed to have a space. This is where the holy rites are being celebrated, and you needed to keep people from being too disrupted. Is literally because it would get rowdy. That's one of the reasons the deacon is always shouting for everybody to pay attention. He's saying, "Be attentive, be attentive, like pay attention," because they wouldn't be paying attention. They would get rowdy.
I think in Casimir Kucherek's
Uh-huh.
book, I think he makes reference to it's a way of saying shut up and pay attention. Something important is going to happen.
Yeah, that's right. So that's interesting, that it has that kind of just pragmatic origin, as well as this profound symbol that it is as well, that this is the holy place, the Holy of Holies, that we need to treat with a special reverence. But so then what happened was iconoclasm, all right? The icons were venerated from very early in the church. And this is I don't want to make this a class about iconography. Maybe we could do a class on iconology at some point. But this is a good book about Orthodox iconography by Constantine Gavarnos. And I found some good information in here. So with the downfall of iconoclasm in the middle of the 9th century, iconography began to develop with great vigor and system. Mainly from the following century, a definite order for the arrangement of icons in the church became established in the Christian East and has continued with certain variations from period to period down to the present. So that is the order that we have now, the arrangement of the icons, which is very clearly prescribed, can date to the 9th century probably is when it became developed. And the reason that the icons started, you had the railing already, but then we're going to start stacking icons on the railing. The church was filled with icons after the fall of iconoclasm. The Seventh Ecumenical Council, condemned once and for all iconoclasm, which had been a scourge for a century or more in the church. Okay, it was the prevalent, people don't realize this, it was the majority perspective in the church for more than 100 years, okay, in the East, that icons were not to be used, that they were idolatrous. It was a majority perspective. And the churches were scoured of the icons, and the icons were literally, iconoclast means breaker of icons. The icons were literally smashed, destroyed, removed from the church. Therefore, but before that, we have from the saints, from the fathers, we have testimony to the icon. Saint Basil gives testimony that he venerated icons. Chrysostom too, that he venerated icons. But we don't have any of these icons anymore because they were all destroyed, except for a monastery in the Sinai desert called St. Catherine's. It's a real interesting irony of history that the icons in this monastery were left unperturbed because it was surrounded by Muslims.
Oh.
And the monastery has the protection of the Prophet Muhammad because it is the place of the burning bush. It's in the Sinai, and they have the burning bush, which he venerated as well. He also venerated the burning bush. So he said nobody can mess with this monastery, even though it's a Christian monastery. You can't mess with it, So it's a great irony that you have icons being protected by Muslims who are also iconoclasts in many cases, from Christians who want to destroy them.
Right.
Anyway, this is just a kind of, I wasn't even going to talk about that. It just sort of came out. But
I'm glad you did. I've heard
but
that before.
But so the oldest icons we have in the world are there, and they're pre-iconoclastic icons, and they're fascinating to look at. But they were all over the world until iconoclasm came, and they smashed them and destroyed them all throughout the Christian East. But then, some people protected them and kept them secret in their homes and passed them down from generation to generation. And so when they condemned iconoclasm, there was all of a sudden everybody was able to show off their icons again, and they carried out their icons that they had kept, that they were able to show that they still had them and still venerated them, and the icons were carried into the churches, and the churches were once again filled with icons. But see, what happens when we overcome a heresy is we always sort of, you could say, overcorrect. You see this in the West. I don't want to upset anybody, but there's a lot of Eucharistic heresies that happened in the West, a lot of denial of what's really happening there. And therefore, you have a Eucharistic piety in the West that is almost exaggerated, that you don't see in the East at all. We don't have this idea of benediction and adoration with the Eucharist. Not that we worship the Lord in the Eucharist, but that's taken for granted. We don't need to beat you over the head with it, because everybody knows this is the Lord. And the way that we worship the Lord in the Eucharist is that we eat his body and we drink his blood, as he told us to do, right? So that's how that Eucharistic worship is expressed in the East. But it takes on this whole other dimension in the West. And you see kind of a parallel with the icons in the East. So in the West, they never had the iconoclasm so much that they do now, but they didn't have to fight with it so much historically. like we did in the East. And so our use of icons is just kind of over the top. Right? we like every inch of our churches should be totally covered with icons. You just fill the place with them everywhere you look. But it wasn't that way, is what I'm trying to get. It wasn't that way before iconoclasm. It was that way after iconoclasm. Our use of icons is more because of iconoclasm. You see what I'm saying? So the whole system of the icons and how they're placed in the church is developed really after we overcame iconoclasm. To make a short story long. And then I just wanted to point out, because we're talking about the Divine Liturgy and the icon screen, that it